I'm Bob Brill. He's Eric Kramer. Welcome to Kramer and Brill, a fantasy football podcast, and now a video cast as well. You can hear the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, radio.com, wherever you get your podcasts. And now you can also see the video cast on YouTube by going to my Bob Brill YouTube channel or by finding the links for all of this at kramerandbrill.com. That's the easiest way. See it right there at the bottom of your screen, kramerandbrill.com. We'll take a look at how we did for you, a look at this week's games, who's trending, our feature Ask the Quarterback, where each week we select a fan who writes in to ask Eric a fantasy football-related question. We'll bring that fan onto the video podcast to ask the question directly. And you can be that fan by simply emailing us at brillpro@gmail.com. That's brillpro@gmail.com. Again, you can see it right there on the bottom of your screen. So how did we do for you? Well, guys we loved and who had good days were Deshaun Watson, 344 yards, 3 touchdowns. Justin Herbert, 366 and 3 touchdowns versus the Jets. Aaron Rodgers, 311 and 3 touchdowns. Ben Roethlisberger, 267, a pair of scores. Keenan Allen, 16 catches for 145 on a score. We like Kirk Cousins against the Cowboys, 314 yards and 3 touchdowns. Taysom Hill proved his worth, had 233 yards plus 51 rushing and 2 touchdowns. ESPN has put him back as a quarterback instead of a tight end this week. So now, you had a 1-week play for those of us who were smart enough to pick him up and start him at tight end this past week. Didn't help me much. I still lost, but he got 25 points for me. Dalvin Cook had 115 and a score. We love the Steelers receivers, and both Claypool and Deontay Johnson had good days. Johnson, 12 catches, 111 yards, but he failed to find the end zone. We liked Antonio Gibson again with 94 and a score. We liked Lamar Jackson. We said he'd have another tough day, and he did. Just 186 yards, a pick, and 1 touchdown. Trending up this week, Taysom Hill, Emmanuel Sanders, Deshaun Watson, Deontay Johnson, Melvin Gordon, Ryan Finley, P.J. Walker, and Robert Tonyan. Trending down this week, Joe Burrow, Tua, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Carson Wentz. So give me your thoughts on this week.
My thoughts as a Bear, a former Bear, and a Bear fan, we'll take Taysom Hill as a quarterback, and I'd start him every game. The guy came up with, like you said, 25 points. He's going to continue to do that. That, to me, is one of the bigger stories of this year, is in the face of everybody thinking that it was going to be Jameis Winston starting in place of the injured Drew Brees, it's Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill goes off. Just as you started him as a tight end, great. Next week, start him as a quarterback. He's still going to be better than most of the people out there. I'd say what stood out to me on the negative side is Lamar Jackson. What the heck is going on? Here's the league's NFL MVP last year. Everybody projected him only to be better, as young as he is and as young as he is in that offense and with all the weapons around him. And yet, what in the heck is going on in the last few weeks? Then as you know, you've got Carson Wentz. Where's he been all week?
I'm kind of wondering that too.
All year, he looked like he's holding on to the ball, taking sacks he doesn't need to take, missing throws that he normally would make. And, and then you got the 2 turnarounds this year, right? So who's going to win in this Belichick versus Brady now that they're on 2 different teams? It starts out looking like Belichick's going to have the upper hand because Brady has a slow start to the season. Then all of a sudden, the roles reverse. Cam Newton, who thinks everybody's in the beginning of the year, including me, here's an MVP candidate. Then he hits the skids. Patriots can't win a game. All of a sudden, the Bucs can't lose a game. And I think that's a great story as it keeps to, evolving. And again, those 2 teams keep going in separate directions. And then on the positive side, you got Sean Payton, who I mentioned earlier, I think probably made the most significant decision that any NFL coach has made this year. And that's starting Taysom Hill over what looked to be obviously Jameis Winston, who came in and had a great time playing for Drew Brees when he got injured. But then, he pulled the end around and Sean Payton selected to go with Taysom Hill, and it paid off. And I think it'll continue to. And then Mike Vrabel with the Titans keeps showing up as a decision maker, playing great defense, keep giving Derrick Henry the ball. And then you got the Browns and Kevin Stefanski, who quietly has taken a team that couldn't win a game. Now they have a hard time losing a game, and Baker Mayfield is barely even a factor in all this. He's just basically, by limiting what Baker Mayfield is doing wrong and limiting his mistakes, and now relying on great defense and a great running game, even without the Myles Garrett last week, they still had a bunch of pressures and sacks and still won the game easily. So I think, that's kind of my biggest takeaways from this past week. And then I guess the combination of Kyler Murray and the weapons and the way he's getting the ball moved around in the passing game, running it himself, and then the marriage between him and Cliff Kingsbury, who nobody thought was going to have, including me, a positive effect as this team and the season goes on, obviously proved a lot of us wrong. And so I think the Cardinals are very much in the mix of getting into the playoffs within, I think, the toughest division in football.
Well, you hit on something that is right up my alley right now. And so before we get to ask the quarterback, I get to ask the quarterback. I've got 4 quarterbacks now because Taysom Hill, and we're only allowed to have 3. And that leaves me with Ben Roethlisberger, Deshaun Watson, who I'm keeping. And I want to keep Taysom Hill. And I think what I'm going to do, I can't trade Carson Wentz, even though I paid a lot for him a few years ago, because the trade deadline's over. I'd have to do a drop and swap, and I'm having a tough time getting that done. So it looks like would you suggest I keep Taysom Hill and cut Carson Wentz?
Yes, I would keep that. I would exactly do that, because look at just at this time of the year, okay, look at Taysom Hill's next 3 games. Denver, Atlanta, who they just smoked, and Philadelphia. All 3 teams trending down, especially on defense. I'd keep him. I'd keep him and play him at quarterback.
He's going to have a tough time playing over Ben, but
I'm not. Look, you have an emotional tie to every Steeler.
No, wait a second.
I get it.
No. Even more than that, I've got 2 of my receivers are Juju Smith-Schuster and Claypool. So the thing about the strategy is I get points for both. If Ben throws a pass to Claypool, I get double points.
Fantastic. I'm saying you would start Joe Gilliam or Terry Hanratty or anybody over a non-Steeler. That's a given. Even if that person's no longer alive, you're taking them.
You got it. Now we come to our regular feature, Ask the Quarterback. Today we welcome in Danny Gura. Danny's from Southern California, where he's a longtime fantasy football owner, longtime actor who appears on a regular network TV show, Superstore. Danny, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, guys. I'm very happy to be here. I love the show. Eric, a big fan of yours as well. Thank you for having me. Yeah, like you mentioned, big fantasy football guy. Been playing for, almost as long as I can remember now, since fantasy really kicked into high gear about 10, 15 years ago. This year, not doing so well. I'm really middle of the pack, and I'm blaming a lot of that on my quarterback, my Lamar Alexander, who's really let me down a lot this season, unfortunately. My question, Eric, if I may, to you, asking about quarterbacks that are out there now. Now we got Joe Burrow's injury. We've got all these different injuries that are going on here with quarterbacks. I'm stuck. I need a better quarterback out there, and I was lucky enough to swoop up on Herbert there from San Diego. From San Diego, look at me, from Los Angeles.
That's okay. My affiliation with the Chargers was in San Diego too, so I'm good with that.
I still can't get used to it. I live in LA. But are there any hidden quarterbacks out there at this point, maybe on the free agent wire, that kind of could sneak up in the end in the last couple of weeks and maybe kind of fulfill us a need or a desperate need if needed? Daniel Jones or someone.
Yeah, I that's a great question, and I think, and you're not alone. I'm guessing there's probably a lot of fantasy football general managers out there looking for a quarterback, a fill-in. And I think two guys that we've just been talking about today, Baker Mayfield, not great numbers, okay, but no poor numbers. He doesn't show up at a game and throw 3 interceptions anymore. It's like 1 or none, mostly none. He might only throw for a couple hundred yards, but he might also have a couple of touchdown passes. And I think another guy that we've been talking about is Taysom Hill. There's a guy that nobody's thinking about as a quarterback. And why not? I mean, he's got, again, the same things that Drew Brees has had. He's got probably one of, if not the best play caller in the NFL in Sean Payton. Nothing but weapons all around him. And he might be the best of all of them himself. Because you get a quarterback that's going to rush for likely a touchdown or 2 a game. And you see him, he's explosive as a running. I mean, he's one of the better running backs on the field, kind of like a Lamar Jackson.
He's fun to watch, too.
You'd be replacing, Lamar Jackson with a better version of Lamar Jackson right now.
And the team certainly gathers around him. My fear is that would he last all the way at least through fantasy playoffs? I mean, we don't know
I don't know, but is that really what you're asking? because maybe not.
Well, no, I want to get to the playoffs first. That's a good point.
You got to get there. You got to get through next week. You know, like this, like in football or in sports in general, it's not like players. They don't think about it as a season. Coaches don't think about it as a season. They think about it as meeting to meeting, practice to practice, and then we got a game on Sunday or Thursday or whatever it is. And so, you know, if you at this time of the year, I would think about it in those terms, which is kind of the basis of your question. Was a lot of fantasy managers right now are going to have players at whether it's quarterback or any number of positions that are going to have injuries. COVID kicks in. Who knows what? An unexpected loss of a player, and then you got to fill someone in. And here's a couple guys in my mind that aren't right now brand name fantasy players. So whoever had Mayfield to start got rid of him early, guaranteed. Taysom Hill, no one even picked up as a quarterback, but like Bob, picked him up early as a tight end. But now that he's going to be a quarterback, a lot of them, I guarantee you, are thinking about, do I start him or don't I? Well, depending, unless you got Patrick Mahomes or somebody like that, I would start him.
Yeah, it's been such a crazy year, and obviously, it's like, you know, there are no answers for this particular year when everyone goes down and everyone's injured or everyone's not prepared. You know, we can use. How about you? You want to suit up for the Jets? You can still get your arm going, can't you?
I would suit up to play against the Jets. Yeah,
that's too easy. That's too easy.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm 56 years old, so I gotta pick my poison here. But like the Jets or the Falcons, and again, back to Taysom Hill. As I mentioned before, here's his next three opponents: Denver, that defense; Atlanta, Philadelphia. I mean, if you're looking at the playoffs, that's a guy that could potentially get you there at that position anyway.
Yeah, and he's certainly got weapons. If he's got a healthy Michael Thomas back, I mean, that's all you really need anyway.
There you go. But they've got obviously more than him. They got Kramer, who he had a touchdown, but barely any yards rushing.
So Dan, you had a question about defenses, kickers on the waiver wire?
Oh, yeah, and I want to ask, since we're coming up to that point also, as we get closer to the fantasy playoffs, of course, everything has to be readjusted to get to the playoffs, to just get in there. What are your thoughts about, you know, not even being loyal to it, because it's kickers and defenses, to just riding the waiver wire and seeing who the matchups are each week at this point? Who's going to be a good kicker? I'll take, you know, Boswell this week and someone else next week, and just see who the good matchups are, especially when the defenses, you know, is there something wrong with, what are your thoughts about riding the waiver wire and just seeing the matchups and playing whatever defenses might be out there each week?
Well, again, this is that time of the year where all the better defenses, and I'll give a nod to Bob Brill on this one, like the Steelers, or the Rams, or some of the defenses that just don't let anybody in the end zone and cause turnovers and get sacks. Most of those, or if not all of them, are eaten up right now. But the ones I think that ride a little bit under the radar right now would be the Cleveland Browns, or the Tennessee Titans, or the Miami Dolphins. There's, you know, you talk about the rave was how great Tua was playing. No, he wasn't. It was their defense that was winning these games for them. It was Tua running the ball and making some key throws here and there, but it wasn't like he was lighting up the scoreboard, and it wasn't all him. He was coming out of any game with 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, not one. So I think there's 3 defenses I mentioned right there. I'll leave the kickers to Bob, but I think that the defenses right now, those 3 right now, fly under the radar for me and show up every week.
And Dolphins are having a good turnaround season now with their defense. You're absolutely right. And looking at their future opponents, it's actually not a bad idea.
On your question about the kickers, I'm one of those guys too that's like, okay, I like to stay loyal, but at the same time, you got a couple of games left, and now you got to make those decisions. And if you're in a non-keeper league, it doesn't matter. You just go for it. If you're in a keeper league, that's a little different story. But even then, kickers change, teams change kickers like they change their uniforms. They go to the throwbacks or whatever. It's guys that you might want to look at right now are Gano, because Gano has been kicking long field goals, and if your league gives bonus points for longer field goals, that's a definite plus. But guys like I dropped Boswell a couple of weeks ago because he has a tendency at some points to get inconsistent. It looks like that was going to happen. So I went and picked up somebody else. But no, I think when it comes to kickers, waiver wire is the way to go, especially for these next 2 weeks because of that. But again, you have to look at stadiums. You have to look at, weather conditions with kickers. All those things come into play. So if you really get deeply into it, that's where you want to go. And instead of just, hey, okay, I'll take this guy because it looks like a good matchup. So answer your question, Dan?
That's great, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the help. I'm looking forward to the end of the season.
All right. Thanks, man.
Good luck, Dan.
Well, thanks for coming on, and keep playing fantasy football.
Thanks for the advice, guys. Sounds great.
Take care. All right. Remember, if you like to ask the quarterback, just email me at brillpro@gmail.com, and we'll select you and bring you in and put you on the show. And next week, and the email right there is on the bottom of your screen, brillpro@gmail.com. So let's get right to the games. Now, Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, Texas at the Lions. You played on a couple of Thanksgiving games, didn't you? When you were at the Lions?
Well, I did. Yeah, I think there was. One of the memories I have, we played the Bears actually, and this was back in I don't know, probably 91 or 92 or something. And I remember making a little dump off throw to Barry Sanders, who goes off 40 or 50 yards with it. And then at the end of that play, or after that pass, I'm William Refrigerator Perry. It felt like a refrigerator was sitting on me.
I can feel it coming right now.
Right? He doesn't move quick to begin with, and he wasn't in any hurry to get up. So I just kind of sat there and tried to keep breathing as long as I could before we had to go to the next play.
My first Super Bowl that I covered was the Bears of the Patriots back in '86, and when the Bears had that fantastic team. And I remember, Walter Payton didn't get a chance to get a touchdown, but William the Refrigerator Perry did. And the fridge, it was like everybody just kind of moved out of his way when he went through the line.
Well, no, kind of he moved them out of his way.
Yeah, pretty much. The Lions are a mess right now. The Texans seem to be willed by Deshaun Watson to move forward. I like Watson here as well as Fuller and the tight end Akins. I like no one on the Lions, but keep an eye on DeAndre Swift coming off the concussion protocol. That might make a change there. Yeah,
the two names I would throw out for the Lions would be DeAndre Swift and Hawkinson, because he's still a guy that is going to score touchdowns. He was their leading receiver in this past game. He didn't get into the end zone, but as I've been saying all along, they look for him. And when I say they, I really mean Matt Stafford. And they've designed plays for him in the red zone and out in the field. So I think he's a good option there. Obviously, Stafford did not have a good game last weekend, but against the Texans, are they that good on defense to not play Matthew Stafford? I don't think they are.
No.
I think, as you said, the Lions are kind of a mess right now. So if you want to stay away from Stafford, okay, but I still think Hawkinson and potentially DeAndre Swift are good options. And then obviously Deshaun Watson, whoever he's throwing the ball to, is a great option.
Staying with Turkey Day, Washington at the Cowboys. Now, we just got word that the Cowboys called an emergency situation due to COVID and a staff member. There's no details on this when we tape this, which is Tuesday. So you really want to keep an eye on the NFL and ESPN for updates on that to see if there's any changes or if any players get put on a COVID list or anything. But the second T-Day game has a pretty good Washington club against a pretty terrible Dallas team. Although Zeke got 100 yards and a touchdown last week against Minnesota, we're not sure what to expect from him. Andy Dalton had a decent day. That helps the run game, but Washington State has had a good game against the Bengals. It is the Bengals, so we'll see. You can't not start Zeke at this point. I'm okay with the receivers here as well, although I wouldn't expect big numbers. On the Washington side, I'm sold on Gibson and McLaurin.
Well, and to go back to the Cowboys, okay, so they, it doesn't matter who was playing quarterback for them this year, they weren't winning. And they were putting up numbers and points, at least with Dak Prescott. But then even when Dalton played his first full game, they were terrible. Yeah. At least it looks like now that he's back in, they can at least compete. And the Vikings obviously are a good team who they just beat. So I think some of their offensive players, starting with Ezekiel Elliott and potentially Amari Cooper, are plays, fantasy football plays. But I think Dalton, I still don't think he's going to grow into, at least not this year, a good fantasy starter just yet. And then Washington, as you mentioned, I think McLaurin and Gibson are very good starts. And it doesn't seem to matter who's playing quarterback for them. And their defense started out strong. They've been kind of up and down since then. But I too would go with Gibson and McLaurin.
Ravens and Steelers. This is the Thursday night game. The annual battle between these two teams puts the Ravens in a position to be the first to beat Pittsburgh this season. They have the best opportunity if you look at the schedule. This is a rivalry going back to when the Ravens were the Browns. And the last time out, Steelers got lucky, but the Ravens have been not good lately. But throw that out the window in this game. I like the Steeler receivers here, but I also like the Ravens D, which will try hard to take them out of the game. And I also like Ben and Connor. Connor at least as a flex. I think Lamar Jackson is a good bet to come out of his funk. He lost the game in the closing minutes the last time the two played. That's going to be on his mind, you got to think. Dobbins is solid, as is Andrews and Steve.
When you mentioned Jackson and his poor play, not just last week and not just the week against the Steelers, but it's been for several now, the past few weeks. And that's one of the things I would mention is that even with guys that you think can't miss at whatever position they're playing, but especially quarterback, it can get in your head and confidence can sink in a hurry. And I think right now, Lamar Jackson's in that category. He's someone that I would potentially steer clear of, and kind of like as we talked about before, Taysom Hill right now is the better version of Lamar Jackson to me anyway. And I think the Ravens defense, who you mentioned, Lamar Jackson's been the one taking all the heat for the Ravens as a team, but their defense has been getting smashed lately at will, really. And so I kind of like this matchup with the Steelers offense and the running game even against the Ravens defense, because the Ravens defense hasn't been stellar either. And I think the Steelers, like you've been all along, this is the best start to a season they've ever had in terms of numbers of wins. And that also plays into a team's psychology and psyche. And so they go out, they walk into a game, they go through the week preparing as though, what are we going to do after this next win? It's not like, are we going to win? And that's I think that's a mindset that, as you've now come to grow accustomed to offensively, they go into every game and at least one or probably two receivers are going to go off. Roethlisberger's going to have a great game, not going to make any mistakes. And the running game has got a good chance with James Conner of turning it out too. So I like the Steelers in this game to win. I like the Steelers in fantasy football terms to do well.
I like your way of thinking, Brian.
You're welcome.
On Sunday, it's the Browns and Jaguars. Browns have seemed to have found themselves with Chubb and the defense leading the way. I also like Mayfield and Landry here against the hapless Jags, who were destroyed by Pittsburgh last week. James Robinson is the only play here for Jags.
And again, I think that's been part of the theme that we've been talking about, or at least I have with the Browns, is how good they are, not just offensively, and they don't pass for a lot of yards, but running the ball. It could be Chubb. Last week it was only Chubb and not Kareem Hunt, but the week before it was both of them. So you've got two of the better running backs in the NFL playing on the same team behind a great offensive line. So the running game itself, whether it's Chubb, and most likely will be, or Kareem Hunt together, are going to be dominating. Their defense is a potential play for me. If I'm a fantasy owner, I'm playing that defense if I don't have a better one, and they are now a legitimate defense. And the Jaguars, they got the great matchup. The Browns are, the Jaguars could not be any more, I guess, in the hole psychologically and physically, because they're playing their third quarterback.
Yeah.
And he's a rookie. And then, I think everything matches up this Sunday for the Browns to do well, win the game, and come out ahead fantasy football wise.
Titans Colts, I'm liking indie players here with a lot, especially with Pittman ready for to prime time and Taylor back in the fold along with the defense. Derrick Henry, Corey Davis, Tannehill, who is pedestrian but solid, are my picks here. I love Pittman here. I mean, he's just gone off 3 weeks in a row now that he's playing, and I just think he's an outstanding pick.
He's a local guy. I mean, he went to high school right down the street from where I live. And
I didn't know that.
And yeah,
I know it's USC.
After later went to USC, right? But he's a bigger receiver, and he's got some athleticism, a lot of it actually. And I think it's, as we were talking about a few weeks ago, how Jonathan Taylor kind of hit the skids with some of the fumbling issues. All of a sudden, that's gone away. They're starting to rely on him now. He's got the speed to be an elite back in this league. And obviously, I think it's a great matchup between the Titans and the Colts. Derrick Henry is still being Derrick Henry. Corey Davis, don't forget about A.J. Brown. And Jonnu Smith last week caught a touchdown. Even though he didn't get a lot of yards, he and A.J. Brown are still viable threats in the red zone. And I think Tannehill, who you mentioned, was pedestrian and has been for a couple of weeks. As we all know, if you add up all of what he's done this year, he really hasn't had any down weeks, and yet he's exploded at times. And so I think that's a potential pick and play for people.
Giants Bengals. Giants coming off a bye, and the Bengals without Joe Burrow. Now, I definitely like Wayne Gallman here. I like T. Higgins. Tyler Boyd, and yes, A.J. Green, at least as a flex play. I'm not sold on quarterback Ryan Finley. And, the Bengals mindset going forward without Joe Burrow.
That's going to be interesting because here's a guy, I was just talking about this with someone earlier today, that as a rookie, if you were Patrick Mahomes, you this year would take Joe Burrow's numbers. They're elite in this league, and he's doing it as a rookie. And he's not doing it behind a great offensive line. And he doesn't have a lot of talent around him. Let's take the Steelers, for example. The Bengals don't even come close to matching up with the Steelers in terms of offensive weapons. And yet Joe Burrow looks like he's been doing this his whole life, which he has, but he's been doing it at an elite level his whole life. And that's what's been impressive. And now you're right. How are they going to move on without him? With Ryan Finley, that's not the same guy, even though I'd love to say he is, because he did go to NC State, but he's not in Joe Burrow's class, and they don't have a lot of, they don't have a great defense backing him up. Whereas the Giants, as you said, they're coming off a bye. Daniel Jones has been playing well at times, and they find ways to make games competitive. And I think Daniel Jones and the rest of that offense is going to have potentially a very good fantasy day because the Bengals have been so poor defensively.
Take a look at Joe Burrow. I mean, this is the injury was after the MRI was a lot worse than they originally thought it was. How does a guy recover from this? I mean, is he back next year, or is that not even an option until the following year?
That's a good question. I think it's late enough in the season that it could become an issue to play next year for him, at least at the beginning of the season. It's funny not funny, but it's there's guys that I know that obviously I played back in the 90s. And back then, my first year was 87. So back then, if a guy got a torn ACL, they didn't have nearly the medical advancements that they do now.
Yeah.
So the question you asked would very much apply to someone who tore an ACL back then, where is their career over?
Yeah.
Not much less are they going to play next year. And now, you see these people like Adrian Peterson back in the 90s tore an ACL and was better the next year. Like the next year was his 2,000-yard season.
Right.
So, I think Joe Burrow has a chance to come back sooner in that regard. I don't think he'll miss the entire season, but he may miss the beginning of the season.
Chargers at Bills. Justin Herbert just keeps on rolling along, and so does Keenan Allen. Lay off the running backs here. While for the Bills, I'm good with Allen, Diggs, and Singletary coming off a bye.
Well, as I've been saying all along, and I'm sure a lot of others have too, that Joe Burrow was mostly, in my mind anyway, the only candidate for Rookie of the Year. And I started hearing lately some of these whispers or people talking about Justin Herbert. Well, now that Joe Burrow's hurt, a lot depends on how Justin Herbert is going to finish this season. And this is a great matchup, not in terms of, it's not an easy matchup, but it's a tough matchup, a challenging one with the Bills defense and the fact that their offense can score points. So this is a game. Now the Chargers got over the hump by beating the Jets and winning a game. Can they win against a very good team? They beat the Jets last week. Now they've got on the opposite end of the spectrum in the same division, the Bills, who are playing one of the better teams in the league. And so, like you said, Justin Herbert, I think, keeps rolling along. I think Keenan Allen, obviously coming off a game where he had, 15 or 16 catches and well over 100 yards, is a good bet to maybe not come up with those same numbers, but again, be the leading receiver for that team. And then obviously the Bills are on solid footing now that they've had a week to prepare as well. I think, Josh Allen and the rest of that crew, Stephon Diggs and Singletary, are all good options.
Raiders at Falcons. Tough to figure the Falcons, but for fantasy owners, you have to love Ridley. But watch the injury wires on Julio Jones. Possible hammy slowing him down. Matt Ryan, solid. Last week, we said we liked Russell Gage. 7 catches, 58 yards, solid. We like him again. I love Carr this week, along with Waller and Aguilar.
Well, to go back to the Falcons, now we're seeing we're a little bit over halfway past halfway past the halfway point in the season, and now you're seeing the effects where the Falcons up until now have had just a great offensive output, especially throwing the ball. But now you're starting to see the effects last week anyway for the Falcons when you don't have a solid running game to rely on, and now. Matt Ryan just starts getting hammered and sacked, and they're making a lot of desperation throws and having a lot of long, third and long yarded situations, and so for that reason, someone at this point in the season, if you have Matt Ryan and he is your starting quarterback, okay, maybe still continue to play him because it is a Raiders defense that is good, but at this point not spectacular. And the Falcons have a lot of offensive weapons, as you mentioned, Calvin Ridley and others. And Todd Gurley has had sort of an up and down, but somewhat solid season. But again, hard to pick them to win this game. I would pick the Raiders, in fact, to win the game. But and as you said, you've got Derek Carr and Waller and Aguilar and Henry Ruggs and the running Josh Jacobs. You've got a lot of weapons on both sides, but if who's going to win the game, I would pick the Raiders in this one, and I picked their, Derek Carr-led offense to have more fantasy numbers as well.
Yeah. Niners at Rams. Niners coming off a bye with more injuries than you can shake a stick at. So I say lay off these guys. The Rams are a start. If you got them, start them, including Higbee at tight end, who seems to have rebounded. And then, of course, they took apart played well against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the other night as well.
Yeah, and I guess interesting, right? Because just a few weeks or a couple weeks before that, they got absolutely manhandled by the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Again, another up and coming, and maybe they've now arrived, I think, as a defense.
I think so too.
But then here's a Niners defense that on paper looks to be great too. But then, or actually the Rams, who was it that played last week? And was it I can't remember now. Anyway, they had a fantastic output last week against the Buccaneers, who were supposed to be a great defense. And then, here the Niners are supposed to be another great defense. But I think the Rams, to me anyway, at this point in the season have established themselves not just offensively that they've done all year, but now defensively they have the defense to match the offense. They've got the running game that helps the passing game. I like the Rams to win this game. They're at home, and as always, I think Goff and the rest of their playmakers offensively are going to have good days. Robert Woods is now having some breakout weeks here, and they've got options. They've got a lot of options, I think, offensively and fantasy football wise.
Well, talking about Saints and Broncos, as we mentioned, we like Hill to continue to do good things. Seems to have had a good rapport, by the way, with both Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, so I would play them as well. Denver remains an enigma, but maybe on the right path. Both Lindsey and Gordon are rushing well and giving Locke a chance to connect as well. Now, he threw for 270, which was solid, even though no scores were involved, but I can't recommend Locke at all.
Isn't it funny how you can't recommend Drew Lock, but yet we can recommend Taysom Hill, who
I know
by comparison, as young as Drew Lock is, he's had many more starts than Taysom Hill. But then Taysom Hill threw some unbelievable throws in last week's game, and I don't know. I guess we've been saying. I think that's why Taysom Hill to me is a great pick as a quarterback now in fantasy football. And, they've got, in addition to Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, they've got Jared Cook at tight end, who earlier in the year was having, great games, scoring touchdowns, which is still a possibility because every young quarterback, as we know, loves a great tight end in the red zone.
With the Chiefs and the Buccaneers, I got to go with Edwards-Helaire, who seems to have found his stride. I like Tyreek Hill as well. On the Tampa Bay team, I like Gronk here, and I like Ronald Jones. I'm not so sold on Brady this week.
Yeah, I would ask you why not? Why not Brady?
I just don't have a good feeling about him. I mean, especially with the Chiefs. Maybe he steps it up for the Chiefs. I mean, I don't know what it is about Brady this season. I mean, he's had some really great games. He's had some Tom Brady-like games.
Right.
And I just, I just can't get it into my head that I would play him. But like I said, I like Gronk because they still have that good connection, and I like Ronald Jones. But I don't know. I just can't buy Brady this week.
All right.
He's
All
a
right.
sell.
Well, I would say that one way to look at this is that the Chiefs really haven't slowed anybody down themselves defensively.
True.
I mean, they score a lot of points, and you've got to throw the ball to keep up with them, or a combination of running the ball, which the Buccaneers do well, as you mentioned, with Ronald Jones. And then you've got Brady, who I didn't believe in earlier in the year, but he's, to me, come around and put up some spectacular games. And I think for that reason, they're going to have to score to keep up with the Chiefs. And that's why Brady and some of the receivers he's got, to me, makes sense, along with Ronald Jones. And, Edwards-Helaire going on the other side, the Chiefs, him and Tyreek Hill, and, who don't they have that you might want to play? And McCole Hardman and the rest, and obviously Travis Kelce. So there's some, there's going to be good options to me on both sides of the ball here in terms of fantasy, in terms of who wins this game. Now we'll really see, are the Buccaneers really for real? And this is a game now with the Chiefs only having lost so far to the Raiders, and nearly twice, but only once that did happen. Now can the Buccaneers be that team that kind of elevate themselves and get up into, are they really for real? Are they really not only a playoff team, but are they a Super Bowl contender? They look to be, but this would be the game that they have to step up and win to prove that.
So you're looking for Brady due to volume more than anything else?
Well, I think that, I think they're going to have to throw the ball to keep up. I think they're also going to have to, no one slowed their running game down, so they're going to have to continue to do that. Brady and any quarterback, really, when you got a running game like that, is going to be effective off of play action. And as you mentioned, that's where Rob Gronkowski shows up in the red zone and off of play action. So, I think this is going to be a game I'm going to watch because I want to see, are the Buccaneers, have they really turned the corner like they look to have? And this is a game, again, we know that everybody knows the Chiefs are a Super Bowl caliber team, loaded. Well, if the Buccaneers are going to get into that conversation, this is a game that they have to win.
Bears and Packers, can you say rivalry? Chicago comes off a bye. I like Robinson, but watch the injury wires on anyone else. Aside from the regular starters, I do like Robert Tonyan here at tight end. He's been solid, and Rodgers, of course, is going to go to him. But I tend to lean to the expert on the Bears team as you.
Well, thank you. As I said before, I wish Taysom Hill could play 2 games this week in the second. And we'll even take him after a game. So I think the Bears, as we all know, just offensively, they're a wreck right now. And I think it's had a negative effect, as it did last year, on what should be a Super Bowl caliber defense. And I think the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, though, I mean, they'll carve anybody up. And even though they lost last week to the Colts, they still put up over 30 points. And, they're a tough team. Like, who are you going to – if you're playing defense against them, who are you going to take away? You can't double everybody. And even if you can, you're still not going to stop Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. And so, as you said, Robert Tonyan in the red zone all year long has been a great threat. And Rodgers himself can make some first downs and keep the chains moving with his legs. And I hate to say it, but they're at Green Bay. Whether they're at Green Bay or in Chicago, I don't think it matters. I think the Packers win this game. And I think in fantasy football terms, this team goes off. Even though the Bears have shut down a lot of good offenses this year, I think the Packers will have a good game plan going in and execute it well.
Seahawks and Eagles, I have 4 words. Get Metcalf the ball. Even against the best, you got to target him. He's going to win his share of those battles. Otherwise, I do like Carlos Hyde and I can't recommend an Eagle player at all. This might be a game Wentz might show up for, but only because I'm likely going to cut him this week.
Well, this might be a game. I wonder if in Philadelphia, if they're asking Doug Peterson, would you come back and play quarterback?
That's true.
So I think, as you mentioned about DK Metcalf, the only guy I think we've seen handle him or give him fits would be Jalen Ramsey when they played the Rams. Right. Other than that, you're right. I mean, some of the routes he ran last week were like the releases off the line he had against Patrick Peterson. as good a cornerback as Patrick Peterson as big and physical and athletic and can cut and move and defend and be physical. He could not even come close to stopping DK Metcalf. So you're right. And the Eagles have nobody like that in their secondary. So I'm sure Russell Wilson's got this thing figured out even better than we do. So, and I think, throwing the ball, the Seahawks are really Russell Wilson and whoever he's got throwing the ball to. And obviously, which makes guys, like Tyler Lockett and some of the other guys they have to throw the ball to, also big plays. David Moore, is it David Moore? Is that the
yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, he's had some great games as well. So yeah, I'm like you. I'm kind of eagled out in terms of fantasy, guys that you have to select from. I don't think they're at this point in the season not good fantasy plays, but the Seahawks still are.
There you have it. Kramer and Brill, Fantasy Football Podcast, and now video cast as well. You can hear the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, Radio.com, and wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also see the video cast on YouTube by going to my Bob Brill YouTube channel or by finding the links for all of this at kramerandbrill.com. That's the easiest way, kramerandbrill.com, right there at the bottom of your screen. Write it down. And don't forget about our brand new feature, Ask the Quarterback. Each week we select a fan who writes in to ask Eric a fantasy football-related question. We'll bring the fan onto the video podcast to ask that question directly. You could be that fan by simply emailing us at brillpro@gmail.com. That is brillpro@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.